Welcome again, everybody. Thanks for your patience and grace. This is the third Cooking with Plants class. We are talking whole grains tonight. I'm Kelly Wilson, and I'll introduce myself a little bit more in a moment, but just a couple few housekeeping things before we get started. One, everyone's muted and your videos are off so that when we produce the recording, it's clean and easy for people to focus on the cooking and the education portion of the night. I still want you to interact. So if you have questions or, comments that you want to share, there is a Q&A function. Please drop your thoughts there. My colleague Abby McCleary is on the line and she'll be monitoring that. I won't be able to do that during the class. Abby will be monitoring. So if your question's relevant to our content, she will interrupt me and make sure it gets asked. If it's a little bit more specific to you personally, we ask that you send us an email, lifestylemedicine@trinity-health.org, and we're happy to answer your question via email. Okay. If you want closed captionings, I sent directions for closed captionings in the email with the appointment link. But if you go up to the More button, which is in your team screen, it's the three dots on the top right-hand side of your screen, and you go down to audio settings, you can add closed captionings that way. So follow that pathway, and you'll be able to see words pop up right on your screen automatically. Don't need to do anything else. So who am I? I'm Kelly Wilson, like I said, and I'm a registered dietitian here at Trinity Health Ann Arbor. I'm with our lifestyle medicine team. I am board certified in lifestyle medicine, and lifestyle medicine is really it's an evidence-based field that applies science in six key pillar areas, which are nutrition, which this class series focuses on that, physical activity, social connection, stress management, avoiding risky substances, and moving your body. So, physical activity. We take evidence based information in those six pillars, and apply them to folks' everyday lives to help them treat, prevent, and reverse chronic disease. I'm really excited to be a part of this team because I love preventative medicine. And part of why I'm really excited to offer these classes is to hopefully give you tools and skills and resources to promote your health and well being. I'm also trained in culinary genomics, which is just a fancy way of saying, how the science of food impacts our genes. So food speaks to our genes, which is pretty cool. We can turn on and off different pathways that promote health just by the foods that we put into our body. And we'll talk about that a little bit in class today. And then I've got a background in organic farming. So I was an organic farmer for 3 years, and I have a certificate in farming from Michigan State University. So that's a hat that I wear and I bring to these conversations as well. And my culinary philosophy is that anybody can cook. So whether you're just beginning or you're far on your journey, this class is for you. The recipes that we're making are for you. Anybody can cook. The recipes that we're going to do tonight, we have three of them. They're fairly easy and straightforward, but recipes are always suggestions, and you're always welcome to make them your own and spice them up in the way that you want them to. So hopefully you will enjoy them and take these and make them your own. I would be remiss if I didn't also introduce you to the rest of our lifestyle medicine team. So the folks pictured here on this slide, they're the ones who also help make classes like this possible. I get to be here on the screen talking to you and get to be the face, but all of these people do a lot of work behind the scenes that really helps make this possible. So just want you to know their faces as well. Abby is the one who is manning the chat, and she's that first photo in the blue shirt that you're seeing right there. All right, and this slide is a quick kind of outline of our classes. So like I said, today we're on that third cooking and using whole grains, but just wanted you to have the list of the rest of the classes in this series, that QR code that is on the slide. If you are not signed up for all the remaining classes, you can scan that QR code. It'll take you to the registration page, and you can sign up for the remaining classes in the series. So our outline today, we're going to be focused on whole grains. Like I said, we're going to go through like what is a whole grain, what does that mean? Why whole grains are good for our health, how to identify whole grains in a grocery store if you're looking at packages or labels. And then we're going to do some quick whole grain show and tell. So I'm going to show you different types of whole grains, and then we will get cooking with our 3 recipes. Our 3 recipes, we're going to make a baked oatmeal. We're going to make a buckwheat pilaf and then a millet tabbouleh. So 3 really tasty, really easy recipes. And before we dive into all of that, I just wanted to remind everybody that this class focuses on general health information, not the treatment or reversal of chronic disease. So I might use some ingredients like salt or olive oil. They're perfectly fine for healthy people to use, but if you have a chronic health condition like heart disease, for example, that you're trying to reverse or control, those ingredients may not be suited for your meal plan. And I'll talk about ways in which you could swap out some of those ingredients in our recipes as well. And if you have a medical condition, please speak to your doctor and your registered dietitian before making drastic dietary changes. Plant foods like fruits and vegetables are pretty much good for almost anybody. But if you're looking at making a complete dietary overhaul, definitely reach out to your dietitian and doctor before you do that. All right, so all the housekeeping stuff is done. Let's get into the thick of it with whole grains. So this slide shows kind of the breakdown of a whole grain versus a white or refined grain. So when we're talking whole grain, we're talking about a seed, right? Grains are seeds that has all 3 components of it intact. So the main 3 components are the bran, endosperm, and germ. The bran is a rich outer layer that is full of fiber and B vitamins, and it's got trace minerals like iron and magnesium in it. The endosperm, that's that starchy middle layer that's mostly carbohydrates with a little bit of protein. And then the germ is this center of the grain that is higher in fat, antioxidants, polyphenols, and B vitamins as well. So all 3 of those components together make a whole grain. The opposite side of the screen, you see the white or refined grain is just the endosperm. So it's just that starchy middle component. So when we're eating these refined grain foods, we're missing out on the health benefits of the fiber and B vitamins and polyphenols that are in the bran and the germ of that whole grain. We're going to talk about that in a second. But this slide lists out some different examples of whole grain foods. This is not an exhaustive list. There are definitely more than what's listed here, but this is a pretty comprehensive list. There are little asterisks next to the grains that are naturally gluten-free. Now, gluten's perfectly fine for people to consume unless you have celiac disease or a gluten sensitivity. I just wanted to note for those of you who do have a gluten sensitivity or a intolerance, what grains would be better suited for you. For those of you who are unfamiliar with gluten, gluten is a protein that's found in rye, wheat, and barley. And some people have intolerances to it, but for people who don't, again, it's totally perfectly fine to consume. So again, those gluten-free grains are the one with the asterisks on it. And I'm gonna show you some examples of some of these grains in a moment. Okay, so why are we even talking about whole grains in the first place? Why are whole grains important when we're talking about this whole food plant-based diet? One of the biggest reasons, and you may have noticed this from that picture of the whole grain, is they're full of fiber. So that outer coating, that bran, is where that fiber lives. And whole grains are one of our best sources of fiber in the diet. And fiber is really important for our overall health because it helps lower the risk of cardiovascular disease. The Nurses Health Study, which is out of Harvard, has shown that folks who consume 2 to 3 servings of whole grains a day have a 30% lower risk of cardiovascular disease than those who don't. So that's a lot of risk reduction for a very small thing of just simply eating some tasty whole grains. Fiber, particularly soluble fiber, which is in oatmeal, like we're going to make a baked oatmeal tonight, is also really helpful for cholesterol reduction. It kind of acts like a sponge and helps our body get rid of excess cholesterol naturally. So, eating foods that are rich in soluble fiber, like whole grain oats, can help with managing cholesterol, which high cholesterol is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Fiber is also really helpful for maintaining feelings of fullness or satiety, which can help lead to good weight management as well. And it's really important for maintaining a healthy gut and good mood. Our gut health and our mental health are really intimately connected. And when we eat fiber rich foods like whole grains, they feed the bacteria in our gut. They're like a prebiotic, which is bacteria food, basically. They feed that bacteria, and that bacteria ferments that fiber and creates short chain fatty acids. And those short chain fatty acids actually help spur serotonin, which is our brain's kind of feel good chemical production. So, really cool. By eating these fiber rich foods, we actually can positively influence the chemicals in our brain that help us feel happy and positive. And I think something that not a lot of people know is that most of our serotonin production, about 70 to 90% of it, actually happens in our gut. So when we're eating foods that are promoting good gut health, we're promoting good brain health as well. And then last but not least, fiber is really important for regular bowel movements. So keeping things functioning well for us. So if that's something that you're concerned with, making sure that you have adequate fiber in your diet, really important. Fiber and whole grains in general can also help with blood sugar regulation. So when we eat a food like that is a whole grain and it has all three components, that bran, that endosperm, and that germ, we're going to digest it much more slowly than we would if we just had that starchy endosperm. So we're going to get a slower spike in blood sugar than if we were just to eat the starch, which means we've got more sustained energy, less spike in insulin, which is the hormone that helps our cells kind of take in glucose, and less inflammation. And inflammation is the root of chronic disease. So by having steady, slow rises in blood sugar versus rapid spikes, we're reducing inflammation, we're reducing risk for chronic disease. Whole grains, in addition to having that fiber in the bran, they also are a rich source of magnesium. And magnesium is really important for uh, insulin production, as well as making sure that our cells are sensitive to insulin so that when it shows up to pull glucose in, our cells recognize it and are ready to respond to it. Magnesium is really important for that. So eating a diet that's rich in magnesium from whole grains or nuts and seeds is really valuable for blood sugar control. And then last but not least, that germ, that small component of the seed where there are fat and phytonutrients, is rich with anti-cancer compounds as well. And these in particular have been shown to reduce the risk of colon cancer. So a lot of health benefits just from eating some tasty whole grains, and hopefully you're feeling inspired purely from the health side of things to add these into your life. So now you know you want to add whole grains in. How do you identify them at the grocery store? Beyond just buying the actual whole grain, like something like this, right? Um, you might want to buy a loaf of bread or some crackers or something that's in a package, right? So the first thing that you want to look for is fiber. So on your screen here, you've got an example of a nutrition facts label from a loaf of bread. All right. And I've circled where the fiber is found, and that's under the carbohydrates on that nutrition facts list. So looking there can be a really good clue as to whether or not what you're consuming is whole grains, or what you're looking at is whole grains. However, fiber can also be added into products. An ingredient like inulin would be an example of fiber being added and not present in the whole food. So this is just one piece of your clue finding, is to look at the fiber. You also want to look at that ingredients list. Okay, so the ingredients list example is where the area is highlighted yellow on the screen. You're looking first and foremost for a short ingredients list with words you can pronounce. That goes for any packaged food that you're looking for. And you want to look for words like whole, 100% whole wheat, whole grain, whole insert type of grain here. And you want those words to be higher up on the ingredients list. So first, second, third, because food is listed on those ingredients lists by order of weight. So the thing that's listed first is what there is the most of in that food product. Okay. You want to steer clear of words like enriched or refined or degerminated. Those all mean that that whole grain has been processed to that white example. So bran and germ have been removed, and then some vitamins and minerals have been added back in. Great that those vitamins and minerals have been added back in, but it's not really in the packaged form that nature intended or that's best for our body, when we're still not getting any of that fiber. So we're going to, have those spikes in blood sugar, and we're not reaping any of those fiber benefits that we previously discussed. The other thing that I think I get a lot of questions about too is like, well, doesn't the color also help? And sometimes, typically whole grain foods, they tend to be more on the brown and darker side, but that's not always the case. So you can use that as one of your clues, but make sure again that you're also looking at the fiber content. You're looking for those whole grain, insert grain here words, and you're avoiding things like enriched, refined. Another really simple tool for identifying whole grains is this whole grain stamp. So you may have noticed this on some products. It's not on every product in the grocery store, but there's the 100% whole grain, which means, you guessed it, every grain in that product is whole. And then there's a 50% whole grain stamp, which means 50% of the grain products listed in that food are whole grains. So you can use these also as clues to help you find whole grain foods. And where might you want to add whole grain foods into your day? So this slide, and I'm not going to read every one to you, and you will have the slides available on the class website after the fact. So don't worry about writing everything down. These examples here are just some quick, easy swaps that you can make to add whole grains in. So you could make a breakfast porridge, not just of oatmeal, but you could make it with amaranth. You can make it with quinoa, brown rice, all sorts of different whole grains work in both sweet and savory applications for a breakfast meal. You can take a whole grain piece of toast, like a nice hearty sourdough, or the previous slide was an example of Dave's Killer Bread is one brand that's also really good. Put some nut butter on it, smash some berries, boom, there you go. You've got a really hearty breakfast. If you enjoy tacos, swap out your flour tortillas for whole grain corn tortillas. And I know some people think that they're like crumbly and not as easy to utilize, but if you gently warm them up for about like 5 to 10 seconds on either side in a pan, or quickly in the microwave wrapped in a piece of paper towel, they become more pliable and they're much more enjoyable to eat. So make sure you warm them up, and then you're getting some tasty whole grains. Swap out whole wheat pasta or a whole grain pasta for your regular pasta. And then you can have whole grains for snacks too, like popcorn. Popcorn's a whole grain, as long as it's not like slathered with lots of butter or salt. Like an air popped popcorn, for example, would be a really good whole grain snack. And when you're baking, you could swap your white flour for a whole wheat, or I'm going to show you some grains in a second, but I like using like a buckwheat flour or a teff or millet. There's all sorts of different flours that you can experiment with in your baking. Okay, I'm going to pause there before we go to show and tell to see if Abby has any questions that came up during the presentation. Okay, it sounds like maybe not. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to show and tell then. I've got a bunch of different grains that I wanted to show examples of. So this right here. Oh, Abby's muted. Oh, I'm sorry, Abby. Let me. That is too funny. I can fix that. I do see somebody asked about inulin. So inulin totally okay to consume, but it is a more processed food ingredient, right? And we're trying to talk about food in its whole form, so as close to how it was grown. So we're looking for products that are getting their fiber naturally from the whole grains. So I know inulin is added to a lot of things, and so if like Kind bars and stuff like that, not problematic to eat, but we just want to eat more foods that are getting fiber from, the whole grain, like this sorghum here. Sorry, Abby, that I didn't have the chance to unmute you. And inulin comes from chicory root, which is a plant. Okay, so on to whole grain show and tell here. In my bowl here, I've got some sorghum grains. So these are round seeds. They're in the millet family. Sorghum is consumed a lot in India and Africa, in the continent of Africa. This is something, it's a longer cooking grain, so it takes about 50 minutes to cook if you're going to cook it on the stovetop. If you have a pressure cooker or a multi-cooker, really great one to put in your pressure cooker or multi-cooker. You can make breakfast dishes with it. You can make pilafs with it. You could use it in place of the millet in the tabbouleh recipe. A lot of different applications. This right here, let's see. Hopefully you can see that. Actually, you know what? I'm going to hold it up over. I'm going to hold it up over on the stove top. So if you can see the skillet, this grain kind of looks like a bowl of sand. It's not sand, I promise. It's called fonio. And fonio is a West African grain. It's also in the millet family, but this cooks in 5 minutes. So if you need a fast, easy whole grain, you just boil some water, you dump in the corresponding amount of fonio, give it a stir, move it off the heat, let it sit for 5 minutes, fluff, good to go. Also makes a really good breakfast porridge. I like mixing it with pumpkin. I really enjoy pumpkin, so but you might not, and that it would pair well with berries or something sweet too if you wanted to make a sweeter breakfast porridge. Also really good with greens as kind of a savory side dish. This again, back over to the skillet. This is millet. And we are going to be cooking with millet today. You can tell it's kind of yellowish in color. You may have noticed this from wild birdseed mixes. Yes, it is in birdseed. That doesn't mean you can't eat it too. Just don't eat it out of the birdseed bag, like buy an actual bag of millet from the grocery store. Millet is really prominent across China in Chinese cooking. It's really prominent in Indian cooking as well. Also a good substitute for rice. We're going to use it in a tabbouleh today. This right here is an example of a wheat berry. So this is the whole wheat grain. And this is also very similar to what, if you've heard of oat groats, this is very similar to what oat groats look like too. It's just the whole grain that has had the outer chaff removed. Now this right here is rolled oats. Most of you are probably familiar with this, and we're going to use these in our first recipe. Rolled oats are that oat groat, so it's this. This is wheat, but we're going to pretend it's oats for right now. It's this steamed and then pressed between rollers to flatten it. And then you get this. This is steel cut oats. So it's basically, again, we're pretending this is oats. This just chopped up into smaller little pieces. So it cooks in a shorter time than that whole groat. But it still takes a little bit longer to cook than your rolled oats. This right here is manoomin, also known as wild rice. So this is a seed of a aquatic grass that is native to the Great Lakes region. So it's really important spiritually and nutritionally for indigenous communities of this region. This is a great, it's got kind of like it does have kind of like a grassy flavor. And sometimes when you open the bag, it smells like a lake, which I know sounds kind of weird, but it's a very earthy, fresh kind of flavor. Really good for pilafs or pairing with squash and greens and cranberry. Think of like your traditional kind of fall flavors. It's used a lot in those kind of applications. And then this is brown rice. So probably, again, looks pretty familiar to a lot of people. It is longer cooking than white rice, but you can buy it in handy dandy little packages like this, which is really nice, that you can microwave in 90 seconds. This one happens to also have quinoa in it. Yep, yeah, quinoa in it. You can get them straight, just brown rice as well. So always take shortcuts if it's going to help you incorporate these foods into your daily life. There's no problem with that at all. And I see that there is another question in the chat. They can't see the camera. Some people can. Okay. And I see Abby, thank you for answering questions in the chat. Doug, if that doesn't answer your full question, please feel free to ask again. Okay, hopefully, is everybody able to see the skillet view now? My hand is there. You should only be able to see two videos. Me, my face and shoulders standing in the kitchen, and then a black skillet with my hand over it right now. Some people can, some people can't. Only one. Okay. So if you go to, let's see, you want to go to your view, which is on, so if everybody is looking at your screen, there is the fourth icon over on the top is view. If you click gallery, you should be able to see both videos. And I'll spotlight both of them so that hopefully that'll help. So now hopefully everybody should be seeing those videos. Okay, and pop in the chat if that's not happening. Yeah. They are? Okay, great, fabulous. Thanks for bearing with the tech. Sometimes I feel like Teams changes every time I open it up, so appreciate your patience. All right, so now we're done with me just yammering at you, and we're going to get to cooking some recipes, okay? I know that's the most exciting thing. So we are going to start with our baked oatmeal. Thank you, ma'am. And I'm gonna bring over my ingredients here. So this baked oatmeal recipe is one of my favorite things to make on the weekend when I know that I'm going to have a busy week ahead of me, and I want to have a tasty, easy breakfast. Okay. I'm going to move my skillet out of the way for a second now because we're going to be working in this 8.5 by 13 pan. So I've got this pan here. We are going to be baking this, so you want to use a dish that is oven safe. You can use a 9 by 9 pan too. That works totally fine. I've lightly greased this with some avocado oil prior to us starting. I've got 2 cups of frozen blueberries that have been defrosted, and I'm just going to add those into the bottom of my pan here. Okay. The recipe that you'll be able to access on the class website does say to reserve some of the berries for topping the dish with. That's totally up to you. Again, recipes are suggestions. When I make this, I just like to throw it all on the bottom. That feels easiest to me. And then they're just kind of baked in. It's still really tasty and good. Next, we want to mix together our dry ingredients. So I've got 2 cups of oatmeal, and I'm pouring, these are the whole grain rolled oats. Okay, and I'm dumping them into my mixing bowl here. I've got some cinnamon. I've got 2 teaspoons of cinnamon just going into here. I've got some baking powder and like a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then I've got 2/3 cup of walnuts. You could use whatever nut you wanted to. Doesn't have to be walnuts. Walnuts are a really good source of omega-3 fatty acid, so alpha-linoleic acid, which is an essential fatty acid, anti-inflammatory fat, good for brain health. So a good healthy ingredient to add into here. I also like to use hemp seeds. So if I was going to substitute hemp seed in here to kind of up the protein content of this, I would use about a 1/2 cup instead of the 2/3 cup of walnuts that we're doing here. It says to chop the walnuts. I just break them up with my hand. So that's what we're going to do right here is I'm just going to break them up real quick. Some of these pieces are already small, so you don't have to worry about it. I'm really a big fan of taking shortcuts because it makes things easier and makes less mess or just I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So never feel bad about making substitutions or swaps or changes or even buying the already chopped up walnuts. Okay, especially if you're going to use them right away, there's not a problem with that at all. Okay. All right. So there you go. We've got our dry ingredients mixed together. Now in a separate bowl, I am going to mix together my wet ingredients. So I've got well, actually, you know what? I'm going to use this same bowl because my ingredients are a lot. So I'm going to mix this up real quick. We've got our dry ingredients. I'm just mixing them to combine. Okay. Just trying to get that cinnamon and the baking powder really just kind of mixed all throughout. And then I'm going to layer it on top of my blueberries here. You just want to try to spread it evenly out throughout your dish here. And I'm going to take my spatula, just kind of spread it out a little bit more. Okay. Now we're going to mix together our wet ingredients, which I've got 1 3/4 cup of non-dairy milk. I'm using an oat milk. You could use whatever kind of non-dairy milk if you felt like you wanted. Soy milk, which is perfectly healthy to consume, does have a little bit more protein. So if that is a concern for you, you might want to go with the soy milk. You just want to look for unsweetened versions of your non-dairy milk. So make sure that there's no added sugar. We've got some maple syrup that we're mixing in here, about a 1/3 cup. And you could totally reduce the content of that or skip that altogether if you didn't want it. We've got some vanilla, adding that in here. And then right here, if you look back over to the camera that's on the casserole, this here is flax egg. So instead of using 2 eggs, we made a kind of similar consistency item using ground flaxseed. A flax egg is 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed and 2.5 tablespoons of water. You mix it up and you let it sit for about 5 minutes. And then you can see here, it's kind of gelatinous and goopy, just like an egg white. Okay. And that's going to help with binding together our dish. Okay. Because that's what the proteins in egg whites do. And this is just using the gelatinous property of the flax to kind of help this dish bind together. And bonus, you're getting some more healthy omega-3 fatty acids from those flax seeds as well. So flax and walnuts are some of the best sources of plant-based omega-3 fatty acids. All right, now we've got our liquid. I'm going to take my liquid measuring cup that we had our non-dairy milk in, and I'm just going to pour the liquid over top of our dry ingredients here. And I'm just looking to kind of evenly coat this. Just want enough liquid so that all of the oats get soft and cooking. Okay, so that is that. Now, just kind of tamp everything down to make sure it's all evenly in there. Thank you, thank you. And so now this is ready to go into the oven. 350 for about 45 minutes. If you're using frozen fruit that has not been defrosted, you would put it in there for closer to 50. And you just are cooking it until the liquid is absorbed and you're getting a nice browning on top. And we'll do some movie magic. Pretend, whoop, I stuck it in the oven and here we go. Magically, our glass changed color. And voila, this is what it looks like when it's all done. Now, I made this at home and I had peaches, so I used peaches instead of blueberries. And I cut those peaches into bite-sized pieces. So again, you can use whatever fruit you want in this dish. Just make sure that you're chopping it up into bite-sized pieces that you would want to nosh on while you're eating your breakfast. So, recipe 1 done. Oh, the baking powder. That was a good question. We used 1 teaspoon of baking powder in that recipe. Thanks for that question. All right, our next recipe, we're going to be utilizing this skillet here. We are making a buckwheat pilaf. So a pilaf is just basically a grain salad. So we're making a grain salad with buckwheat. And we are going to, let's see, I need olive oil. We're going to start by cutting an onion. So I've got 1 yellow onion here, and I am going to come over to, you can see the corner of my camera a little bit. There you go. So you can see this better. All right. So I've got a cutting board with a towel underneath of it to stabilize that cutting board, keep it from slipping around. I am holding my knife between my thumb and my first finger with my hand wrapped tightly around the blade, my remaining 3 fingers, okay? I'm gonna set the the root end, which is these hairy bits of the onion, down on the cutting board, stem, which is this papery part, up. I'm going to keep my hand out of the way. I'm gonna take the tip of my knife and slice down towards the cutting board to cut my onion in half. And while we're doing this, I'm going to heat up my skillet so it's ready to go for us when Okay, so now we're gonna peel off the papery bits. We don't want that. It wouldn't really taste very good and it'd be an odd texture in our dish too. So we're gonna peel off that papery layer. So I've still got some like thin layers here that I don't really want. So I'm just gonna peel those off. It's totally fine, not an issue. There's still plenty of onion here. And then what we're going to do is trim off that stem end, that tip. Okay, it's got some of that papery bits that I don't want. And then you can see that there are veins. Hopefully you can see there are veins kind of going long ways on the onion. I'm going to use those as guidelines to slice my onion. And I'm going to not slice all the way through to the root. I'm going to leave a little bit of space here so that my slices stay together. And then I can cut the other way and get nice dices. So I'm following these guidelines. And notice that my hand that's not holding the knife is in a C to keep my fingers away from that knife blade. I'm still stabilizing the onion, but my fingers are out of the way and safe. Okay, so I've made those lines. Now I'm going to go the opposite direction. And I've got some nice, evenly diced onion. Okay, and then the stem end, the root end, you can just go slice through and there you go. You that. All right, we're gonna feel our pan is getting warm here, so I'm gonna add just a touch, less than a tablespoon of olive oil here. And if you did not want to use olive oil, if you were avoiding it for health reasons, you could do a water saute. You could add a couple tablespoons of water here instead, and it would be just as tasty and just as fine. Still gonna cook. So putting that in here, we're gonna cut the other half of our onion while those are getting going. And what we're looking for with our onions is them to become translucent. So you can see right now, they're really white. We're gonna cook them until they're kind of glassy and almost see-through. Okay. And if you wanted a review of the onion cutting, we're going to do it again right now. So cut the tip off, throw that papery bit away, follow your lines. Don't cut all the way through, leave the stem end intact. And slice the opposite direction. And just do a quick little rough chop. We're doing this because we want all of our onion pieces to be roughly the same size, so they cook about the same amount of time. Okay, so those are all in there. And give that a little bit of a stir. And my pan right now is on medium high. Okay. Oops. Could one of you hold this? I'm sorry. I don't know why it's not. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, so the next ingredient that we're going to prepare are mushrooms. We've got 2 packages, so 16 ounces of mushrooms. I already sliced them here, but wanted to go through slicing them with you as well. And I give our onions a little bit of a stir here. It's starting to, you can notice that they're starting to change color, turn a little like shiny and a little bit more yellow as opposed to white. You just want to give them a few more minutes. Our mushrooms. So I'm using baby portobello mushrooms. You could use any kind of mushrooms that you want to. I just like the texture of these better. But health benefits wise, all the same, full of a lot of anti-cancer nutrients, very healthy. If your mushrooms are dirty, don't put them under water because they'll absorb all of that water. Take a kitchen towel or a paper towel or use your fingers to kind of just brush that debris off. You definitely don't want that in your food, so take time to clean them. So I'm putting the top of the mushroom down on my cutting board, just doing some slices that are maybe about a 1/4 inch thick here. I hear my onions sizzling, so I'm gonna give them a little bit of a stir and turn down and heat this a little bit. So they're almost to where we want them. Okay, and then we're just gonna keep doing that with our remaining mushrooms here. Then we are going to add our mushrooms into our skillet with our onions. Again, this is 16 ounces, so it's one of those large packages of mushrooms. And you could totally use white mushrooms if you wanted to as well. All right, our final two ingredients are kale and buckwheat. So I've got a half of a small bunch of kale, and I'm going to destem it. So if you see any recipes that say to destem kale, this is what you do. So you hold in one hand the end of the stem that has less of the leafy bit. Then you take your other hand and you kind of pinch lightly the stem and pull down as you're kind of pulling up on your other hand. So voila. Now I've got stem and leaf separated from each other, and I'm going to do that for a couple of these stems here. And then I'm going to give them a quick chop. And they're going to go right into my pan with my mushrooms and everything else. Okay, so you can see on my cutting board here, I've got a nice pile of my kale. I'm just going to kind of bunch it all together here, roll it up as best I can. And I'm going to take my knife and just, again, keep my non-knife hand out of the way. Just give it a rough cut so that it gets into smaller pieces. And I'm probably going to go back the opposite direction. Okay, you could also rip up the kale if you wanted to. Just use your hands to do it, totally fine. You could use frozen kale in this recipe. You could use the bagged kale that's already chopped up. Lots of options here. Give my mushrooms a little bit of a stir here. All right, and I'm going to add my kale into my pan. And I am going to add a little bit of water here to steam this to help these mushrooms cook down a little bit more, I think. Let me get some water. Just adding maybe about 2 to 3 tablespoons of water here. Give that a quick stir. Okay, and you can see those mushrooms are starting to change color and cook down. 16 ounces at one of those big containers seems like a lot, but mushrooms cook down much smaller than what they start. So they condense quite a lot here. Okay, our final ingredient that is continuing to cook that we're adding is buckwheat. So buckwheat groats, they are triangle. Well, they went away. Do we have the bowl? They're the triangle ones. Thank you. Buckwheat groats look like this when they are raw. They're like a pyramid shaped grain. Okay. And you can see them better over here. They're pyramid shaped grain. And this is what they look like cooked. Okay. We cooked them 1 cup of buckwheat groats to 2 cups of water. I love working with buckwheat because it takes 15 minutes max to cook. Very fast, easy, whole grain. So if you need a fast whole grain, buckwheat is your friend. It's got kind of a floral, nutty flavor. And it's really high in an antioxidant called rutin. So you're getting some good antioxidants by eating this whole grain as well, and all the fiber benefits that we talked about before. I'm going to stir this kale and mushroom mixture again. All righty. This is looking pretty close. We're getting some browning on those mushrooms too, which is really nice. All right, and now we're looking like it's ready to add in our buckwheat. So I'm just gonna dump that in. I'm gonna break it up a little bit. Hold it. And I'm going to turn off my heat. And we are done. Voila. Good to go. Now, this is right now, as it stands, is a really good hearty side dish. If you wanted to make this a complete meal, this would be really good with some white beans or some chickpeas added into it. Or you could toss in some tempeh. We're going to talk about plant proteins. Tempeh is a soy-based plant protein. We're going to talk about those next month, but this would be a really good dish that would pair well with tempeh as well. And I typically like this also with some fresh chopped parsley as a garnish to add some nice bright flavor as well. So there you go. Recipe number 2, buckwheat pilaf. Tasty and easy side dish. All right, so I'm going to set that off the heat for us. And we can, let's see if we can adjust this to just be on my, then you don't have to hold it. See if that works. Okay. You're okay with holding it?
Oh, yeah.
No. Okay. All right. So our last recipe that we're going to do is a tabbouleh. Tabbouleh is a Mediterranean dish that is really common at a lot of Mediterranean restaurants. You might have had it with falafel or kebabs, and it's actually really easy to make at home. So we're going to start by making a dressing. So I've got here a 1/3 cup of olive oil going into my bowl. I've got 3 tablespoons of lemon juice, which my helpers, Joni today, she generously squeezed for us. And that was about half of a lemon. You might get 1 to 3 tablespoons out of a lemon, depending on how juicy it is. You can also use bottled lemon juice. Totally fine. I've got a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'll put that in here. I've got some cumin. How much do I have? I got a 1/4 teaspoon of ground coriander, not cumin. Coriander is the seed of the cilantro plant. So we're using that seed in here. And then a pinch of cinnamon, which is the fun kind of surprise ingredient in this dressing. So I'm going to use a wire whisk here. Just kind of get that a stir. And that's just helping the fat and the acid mix together and emulsify. So got that. Next, set the dressing here. The main ingredient in tabbouleh is parsley. So we've got 2 beautiful bunches of parsley right here. This is basically a parsley and green salad. So to prepare our parsley, I'm going to chop off the end that has most of the stemmy bits. Okay. And I'm going to set those aside to be composted. And then I'm just going to gather my parsley, kind of like what we did with the kale, just kind of roll it up, bunch it together. And I'm just going to go down my bunch, slicing down towards my cutting board to get my parsley into smaller pieces. And I'm just going to keep kind of pulling it together. It's a little bit messy because it sticks to your hands, but the results are worth it. It's very tasty. And again, you can cut this as finely as you want it or as rough as you want it. Just depends on how you like your tabbouleh. But make sure you eat your tabbouleh with friends so they can tell you when you have parsley stuck in your teeth, because that is one of the challenges of this dish. You will get, it's very, very tasty, very, very tasty. But you might get some parsley stuck in your teeth. Okay, so we've got our parsley chopped up. We're going to add it into our bowl here. Wipe it off my hands. All right. I'll set that aside for now so that we can get going with our other ingredients. We're also going to use 3 Roma tomatoes, okay? I'm using Roma tomatoes because they have more flesh and less like watery on the inside, and that's really what we want. We want the thick flesh for this application, less of that wateriness that might dilute our dressing and the flavors in this dish. So to prepare these, we want to get rid of this stem end, or like core, as people might call it as well. So we're going to use a paring knife. Remember in our very first class, we talked about the 3 essential knives that you need. Chef's knife is what we've been using all class. Paring knife is one of those other 3 knives in addition to a serrated knife. So this works really well for coring things like these tomatoes. So to do that, I've got my paring knife. I'm going to take the tip of that paring knife and just insert it on the top of that tomato, kind of at an angle around the core, and then flip. Now, there we go. Flip it right out. Okay, easy peasy. I'll do it here down on the cutting board as well, so it's a different angle. Again, I've got my tip of my paring knife going into the tomato at an angle, flipping it out. Tip of my paring knife going in, angle, flipping it out. And then I'm just going to rough chop these. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're just looking for bite-sized pieces for all of them. And you could totally use a regular tomato or cherry tomatoes if you wanted. Totally up to you, but I like the fleshy of this. This dish, because of the fact that it has tomatoes, is really best fresh. You can store it in the fridge for a couple days. There's no like food safety issues with that. The only thing that's going to change is your tomatoes are going to get a little bit mealy, because tomatoes like to be stored on the counter at room temperature. They don't like to be stored in the fridge. They're really susceptible to cold damage. So this is a dish that is its absolute best when it's fresh. All right, our next ingredient, we got an English cucumber. English cucumbers have thinner skin than traditional slicing cucumbers, and that skin is not as bitter. So it works well in this application to keep the skin on. So we're going to cut the stem and the flower bud ends off. I'm going to cut it in half again. Cut it in half long ways. Cut it in half long ways. I'm going to place my cut sides down on the cutting board. I'm going to slice those in half. And I'm going to go down, again, keeping my non-cutting fingers out of the way. Again, just get bite-sized, rough chop pieces. Sticking it into my bowl. Yeah. This is, you might be guessing by the kinds of ingredients, also a really good summer recipe, right? Cucumbers and tomatoes are in season about the same time. So this is a good recipe to have in your back pocket for the summer. We've got some scallions or green onions that we're adding into the mix. You can use the whole green onion. We're going to trim off those root hair ends and check to see if there's any like wilty leaves. We don't want those. We're just going to slice down green onion, some of the greens and some of the whites. And I'm going to stop about there because there's just some dry ends, and we've got enough pieces apart. Add them into my bowl as well. Right, we've got 1 clove of garlic. You could use a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder here. I would mix it in with your salad dressing ingredients. So I just chopped off the root end. To peel it, you can just take the side of your knife, smash it down, and oh look, the peel just came right off on the back of my knife. Very easy. And I'm just gonna slice. And we are mincing. Mincing is used for things like garlic or ginger, really heavily flavored ingredients that we want to get into small pieces so that flavor can infuse throughout our entire dish. Okay. Garlic, to reap the full health benefits from it, it's really best if you can cut it about 5 to 10 minutes before you're adding it into your dish to let the enzymes do their magic. But it's still healthy and still valuable and still a wonderful flavor if you're adding it right into your dish as well. Okay. And our second to last ingredient, we've got some mint leaves. This is a very fresh flavorful salad with the parsley and the mint. We're not using the stems, we're just using the leaves. And again, I'm using that same principle of just kind of stacking the leaves on top of each other, bunching them up, rolling, and slicing. This is also called chiffonading when you stack and roll leaves, whether it be herbs or big leafy greens, and you get little strips like that. That's chiffonading. So if you ever see that in a recipe, that's what that is. Okay, we're gonna add that in here, and then last but not least, we've got our cooked millet. Same water to grain ratio as our buckwheat, 1 to 1. And millet is also a super quick cooking grain, 15 to 20 minutes. And you've got your millet ready to go. Tabbouleh typically is made with bulgur wheat, which is just those wheat berries cracked and parboiled, so it cooks a little bit faster. And tabbouleh lends itself really well to pairing with really any grain. So you could make this recipe with quinoa as well. That's a really nice combination. You could do it with the bulgur like it is traditional. We're doing it with millet today. Lots of different options. And I'm going to add in my dressing. Give it a quick little stir again. Pour it right on. And voila, we have tabbouleh. Again, if you wanted to make this a complete meal, have it with some falafel, which are chickpea balls or whole chickpeas themselves, and a slice of like whole grain pita and some hummus. You've got a nice, tasty, very fresh, very flavorful salad right there. So recipe number 3. We are here. I will stop this so you can stop holding that. Thank you. I know we're a few minutes over, but I did want to just share a couple other things. We at the hospital on Wednesday, the 29th of this month, we are having a whole grains day in the lobby. So if you are a colleague and you're in the hospital, or even if you're not and you want to come say hello between 11:30 and 1:30 p.m., our lifestyle medicine team will be in the lobby with different samples of whole grains. So if you're wanting to try some things before you dive into the world of whole grains, we'll be there and you can come hang out with us and try some foods. I also wanted to share the QR codes for the class website. So the one on the right is the class website. The actual website link is right there as well. I know you can't click on it on your screen now, but these slides will be shared with you in the class follow-up email as well. That's where all the recipes are. That's where all the recordings live of tonight and all the previous classes. So go there to get all those resources and information. And then if you could please complete the survey that is on the left-hand side of your screen. It takes 4 minutes to complete, but it really, really helps us make sure that the classes and programs we're delivering are valuable to you and other folks in the community. So please take a moment to share your valuable feedback. And then if you have any questions or comments about tonight's class or anything that we didn't cover, we didn't get to your question, our email address is right there on the screen. Please email us. We want to make sure that you're getting what you need to fulfill your health goals on your health journey. So with that, I will end. I really appreciate you all sharing your time with us tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Hopefully you're feeling excited to try some whole grains. If you do, I would love to hear about it. So please email us at that email address. And with that, hope you have a wonderful evening. Take good care.